there, Core955 bringing you the next review, but this time it's something special. Today, we will be looking at Resident Evil 1 and all of its ports to see which version is the best bang for your buck. It should be noted this will only contain the original ports. That means no remake from 2001, as if we were going off of that basis, it would be clearly the superior product. So, let's jump right in, shall we? So, Resident Evil 1 was developed and published by Capcom and released in 1996. It is considered a spiritual successor to Capcom's earlier foray into survival horror, a game called Sweet Home. Resident Evil is the game that set the archetype for survival horror games for years to come, and has many of the tropes and cliches that we commonly associate with the genre. Resident Evil was also inspired by a large amount of B-movies that heavily influenced the dialogue and story, and another early survival horror game known as Alone in the Dark provided the inspiration for the pre-rendered backgrounds and camera angles. The player takes over as either Jill Valentine or Chris Redfield, two members of the Elite STARS Alpha team sent into the Arklay Forest to investigate a grisly rash of murders in the area. After being forced to flee into a nearby mansion, you'll fight for your survival and to uncover the mystery behind this incident. The controls are a particularly divisive area within the game, as some people have a passion for the tank controls found within the game, and some have a great disdain for it to the extent that it puts them off from playing the game. Personally, I find it something that can take a while to get used to, but once you learned how things operate, you'll be flying through the mansion halls like a pro. Within Resident Evil 1, you're quite often forced into tight corridors where you must make a decision if you want to expend precious ammo to drop an enemy or take your chances with dodging around them. If you choose the former option, then you'll have a fairly large arsenal at your disposal, ranging from the humble mainstay of the Beretta pistol to the awe-inspiring rocket launcher. Game difficulty and inventory space are decided by which character you choose to play as. Chris is the hard mode of the game and only has 6 inventory slots, but to contrast this, he has a much larger health pool than Jill, does more damage with the knife, and once he acquires a handgun, he has the ability to score a random critical headshot which will instantly kill whatever he's shooting. Jill, on the other hand, is the easy mode of the game. She has a larger inventory of 8 slots, has a lockpick for getting through certain doors early, and opening alternate routes of exploration, and also has a companion in the form of Barry Burton who shows up at certain moments to help her along. It should be noted that while Chris has a companion in the form of Rebecca Chambers, her impact on the gameplay is much smaller compared to Barry's. There's a large range of foes you'll face throughout your trip in the Spencer estate, ranging from the iconic zombie to the terrifying hunter and more. The only consistency between the foes is that they all stand within your path to survival and must be dealt with in one manner or another. Resident Evil 1 is known for setting an atmosphere primarily with limited supplies, a synthetic musical composition, and its clever use of camera angles paired with pre-rendered backgrounds which culminate in a tense environment and a nail-biting experience. This is both an area of shining and an area where the game fails hard depending upon which version that you're playing. If you play the original campaign, even on the Director's Cut disc, then you'll get the original soundtrack, which fits the mood well. But if you play the revamped campaign featured in the Director's Cut version, then the soundtrack is noticeably worse in most instances. Only 1 and 2 tracks are actually an improvement, and some are just so bad that they kill the entire tension that was to be had in the moment. The voice acting within this game can be another divisive area, as the actors were not trained voice actors. Some of the actors are cheesy but memorable, such as Barry Burton, but some, such as Richard, are quite poorly executed and do not sound serious at all. A short clip of Richard and Barry's voices will follow.
Here's a lockpick. It might be handy if you, the master of unlocking, take it with you.
Chill. This house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
The graphics within Resident Evil 1 have not aged spectacularly. The 3D models are noticeably inferior compared to the later installments which utilize that engine, such as Resident Evil 2 and 3 and Dino Crisis. The CG at times is quite bad, as well as in some moments, though they do accomplish the task well for 96 standards. The live action intro is actually quite well done, and it sets the tone of the game that will follow well. The pre-rendered graphics do allow the backgrounds to be significantly more detailed than many of its competitors at the time, and do help with immersing you within the environment of the Spencer estate. This is going to be a very large segment, so we will be discussing only the major differences from the original PS1 version that set these ports apart. First up the bat is Director's Cut. There's actually two versions of Director's Cut, the original and the DualShock edition, which adds DualShock support to make use of the new controllers with joysticks. The Director's Cut kept the original campaign intact, but it also added an optional new campaign that redid the item placements, changed camera angles within the rooms, changed enemy placements for a harder challenge, added a new soundtrack, and changed the costumes in the game. The next is the PC port, which the changes were minimal, but they are worth mentioning. It features the censorship within the game's cutscenes removed, and it also featured the opening cutscene in color. The Sega Saturn port is notable for several reasons. It is visually speaking the worst looking version, but it has several additions to make up for this, including a unique enemy called the Tick, which is a hunter replacement found within the underground segments, and the series' first battle mode, simply called Battle Mode, which was later popularized with Resident Evil 2's Extreme Battle and Resident Evil 3's Mercenaries mode. So, the last version we will be discussing today is the DS port, which was released in 2006. This port is probably the most comprehensive version of the game, featuring the most content. It has the original version and a unique version of the Arrange mode called Rebirth mode, which does what the Range mode did for the Director's Cut, but it also included several additions to take advantage of the DS's capabilities, most notably the mic and touchscreen. There's a couple gameplay changes which are nice quality of life improvements, the first of which is the knife is permanently bound to a trigger instead of taking up an inventory space, and the quick turn from Resident Evil 3 is added to enhance dodging capabilities. You can also choose between blood colors of red and green. There's also several unique game modes included for this version, called Multi-Card Play, which lets you play with up to 3 other players in 2 game modes. These modes are a versus mode and a cooperative mode, which feature 3 maps and 9 selectable characters with different loadouts, though the additional characters must be unlocked. There is yet another game mode called Master of Knifing, which lets you play a score version of the knife minigame added to the Rebirth mode, as you fight through multiple stages, enemies, and bosses with only a knife in a first-person view. This game certainly has its downsides, chief of which is its poorly aged graphics, tank controls, and depending on the version you play, soundtracks. The graphics are more so to do with the fact it was released in 1996, which was early into the PS1's lifespan, and it was also Capcom's first game utilizing the new Resident Evil engine. Future games in the engine featured much more improved models while also improving the amount of models that could be on the screen at the same time. The tank controls are listed as a downside, more due so to the fact that many younger players have difficulty acclimating to the older controls of the game, though the controls are a necessary part due to the pre-rendered backgrounds to keep you from turning every time a camera angle shift occurs. The soundtrack is only an issue on the Director's Cut Arranged mode, but it's bad enough that it deserves to be mentioned, as at some moments it'll just kill the attention entirely. Now we've reached the conclusion of our review and port comparison, where we find out which version is the best and if you should bother picking this up. Personally speaking, if you're looking for pure content, then the DS version is the one to go with. It has the most content of all versions of the original Resident Evil 1, it is portable and common to find, though overall I feel no matter which version of the game you choose to play, you will enjoy it. I definitely recommend Resident Evil 1 as a buy, as the game, despite all the flaws it has, I feel they're easily overlooked if you take into consideration the era this game released in, and my reasoning for buying the game is the fact that it's fairly cheap and common to find. You'll get to experience the foundation of most survival horror games that followed in the next decade, and quite honestly, playing the different versions to get footage for this review reminded me of how much I enjoyed this game years ago. This has been Core955, reviewing Resident Evil 1 and its ports. Thank you for joining me. Signing off.